My name is Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Dispatch.
I do. You're gonna do it. Do it really well.
And I believe the world needs more dispatchers.
Around in the mud, blood, and
Plus
beer.
years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July is
Saying community policing, right? What about community dispatching?
So on this show, with the help of my guests, we will educate, empower, and support the heroes behind the headset.
right.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch with me, Ashley, the Raspy Dispatcher. If you do tune in to this podcast by watching on YouTube, you have just officially seen our new introduction reel. I had the old one with my long hair on there for a while, so I was really excited to finally put together a new opening video. And in that opening video, I got to put some of the folks I've been going out and visiting at these centers across the states. We've been to San Jose Police Department, and we've been to a department in Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska. So those videos are deep in the editing process. They're a little more extensive than a regular everyday podcast episode, but it is a segment that's going to be audibly on here on our podcast, but mainly those videos are being created for our YouTube channel to really highlight centers and what they look like in the real world, out in the wild, and show the everyday citizen who the people look like that are answering 911. So if you don't subscribe on our YouTube channel, make sure to head over to the Raspy Dispatcher on YouTube, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on those upcoming segments. And if you want us to come visit your center, shoot me an email. We're trying to get to as many centers as possible. So definitely would love to chat with you about coming out and bothering you and your people for a day. So today's episode of Let's Talk Dispatch, I'm super excited about. My guest is a DEI instructor and senior consultant for 911 Training Institute. We love Ryan. We love the 911 Training Institute. We love Jim Marshall. So we're super excited. They're also a graduate sociology student at Eastern Michigan University, and they're specifically cooking up, creating a study that really delves into things dispatchers deal with answering these 911 calls. And we're going to talk more about that during our episode today, but let's bring on my guest, Tyrone Kelsey. Hey, Tyrone.
Hey, Ashley. Hey, everyone. Good to be here.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Thank you for being willing to come on. Like I told you before we hit the record button, I was really excited when you sent over the questions and the topic you were interested in talking about. So I definitely think this is going to be a really educational and insightful conversation.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I hope it's educational excitement. Give me some reviews afterwards.
Well, hopefully they tell the truth because they're gonna learn something today, you know. Well, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved in the 911 Training Institute.
So a little bit long, but I'll give you the short version. From Detroit, that Paris city and the Midwest, otherwise known as Detroit. July 23rd, 1967, the Detroit riot, I was 11 years old. I watched the city burn, literally.
Wow.
My mom tried to explain to me what was going on. I couldn't get the concept of the dynamics of race and animosity between white and black people. During that period of time, that was considered one of the worst riots in the country. 42 people died.
Wow.
342 arrested, 1,000 people injured, 1,400 buildings burned. And that was when I discovered the world. And upon discovering the world, I had all kinds of questions, and I was in pursuit of answers, and I have not stopped asking those questions and pursuing those answers since then.
Mm.
So fast forward to freshman year, Eastern Michigan University. I've had all kinds of different diversity related experiences, but one of the experience I had was I met a young man who asked me where I was from. And
Mm.
I said, I'm from Detroit. And he goes, really? Where are you from? I said, I'm from Detroit.
No, like for real.
And then he got real aggressive, was in my face. Really? Where the heck are you from? And I go, oh,
Mm.
it was one of my trigger moments to go, I gotta, diversity, my line of work, diversity has chosen me. I didn't choose it.
Mm.
He taught me a lot about that kind of dynamic. Fast forward, I started doing stuff with all kinds of different expressions of diversity. One of those with multiracial churches,
Mm.
helping leaders who would want to strategically transition their homogeneous congregation to a multiracial congregation. And so I've been doing that for a number of years. Lo and behold, one Sunday, Jim Marshall shows up at my church.
Jim, I didn't know that's where we were recruiting.
Yeah. So he and his wife, lovely wife Linda, had moved down from Petoskey, be near their daughter who had moved into the area. He literally sat behind my left shoulder. And the dynamic that happens, here's another expression of diversity, right? So it's multiracial church. And what they told me, I didn't know that's what they were doing. It was called the CTWC School of Rhythm, where the white congregants would go clap when Tyrone claps.
That's funny.
So with that as the background, been going there for a number of years. With that as a background, all of a sudden I'm hearing this phenomenal rhythm and clapping out of my left ear. I turn my head and there's Jim Marshall.
That's hilarious.
We hit it off right away, went out to breakfast that following week, have been talking and being friends, him and my wife, Karen, his wife, Linda. And one of the conversations, because of what I do, that has been ongoing for a number of years has been related to diversity. He was one of the few guys that would actually read the books together, and then we would have conversation and dialogue. George Floyd, phone rings off the hook, 911 Training Institute phone, goes, do you guys do diversity? He goes, no, but I know someone that does. Bingo. Here I am.
Oh my gosh. It's so like interesting you telling, your introduction into this world was back in 67 and then full circle George Floyd.
Yes.
I mean, how unfortunate and how like full circle that truly is, and kind of speaks to how we've come so far and yet we're still kind of in the same place in some regards.
Yeah, and therein is what I try to help people understand in the classes that I conduct is why we need, and asking the questions about our history and the dynamics of stereotypes and prejudice and bias that continues generation after generation, and just have different expressions related to identity characteristics, not just race, why that continues to happen, and then how to recognize it so that you can begin to have meaningful conversations, and then more importantly, begin to take corrective actions for that, because it's the downside of the positive way in which we learn and acquire things, the way our brains work, how biases come about there, etc. But unconscious bias gets is part of our social conditioning, and we pick things up as we're growing up about categories of people that turn into stereotypes, turn into biases, that turn into speech and actions that are negative and troublesome. So
Mhm.
I try to help people understand that.
Exactly. And so I would say that, like, when we're talking about diversity in 911 specifically, right? How does diversity among 911 emergency service personnel contribute to effective emergency response and relationships with the community we're serving?
Yeah. So, great question. Let me just back up and kind of give context for diversity, make sure we're kind of
Mhm.
understanding that on this sort of the same page. Everyone gets the element of diversity with which is the representation is just
Mhm.
the diverse spectrum of race, ethnicity, identity, characteristics, et cetera. Everyone sort of gets that part,
Yeah.
but it's also about diversity of thought and diversity of orientation and experiences. Bias is a thought related dynamic, and we get locked in on our lens and how we look at the world and understanding the world. So, diversity of thought expands that outlook
Mm.
to try to provide a 360-degree view and perspective of things so that you can have the big picture and understand. And it's a special dynamic that all leaders need to have.
Mm.
And so, in addition to just the variety of our personalities and our peoplehood and who we are as individuals, as humans, but it's also about our experiences
Mm.
and about our perspectives and our thoughts perspectives.
Mm.
The reason that's important is because that's what gets to the point of problem solving and creativity and innovation
Mm.
and looking at something and understanding it from different perspectives and considering other possibilities so you can not have blind spots.
Mhm.
Um, right? So in that regard, um, diversity is a reflection of our social culture dynamics,
Mm.
very complex layers of social conditioning that causes us to um, be isolated from one another. And therefore, when we're in contact with one another, we sort of try to figure out who are you? Who am I? Why are we here? How do we work together? What's the mix? If there's toxicity when we're working inside in our interpersonal relationships, oh, and there's different communication modalities when we're in the citizenry there because of their subcultures and their signs and symbols and meanings and how they relate to each other. The citizenry that 911 interacts with has a lot of communication challenges and differences based on the demographics of the community in which they serve.
Mhm.
So diversity is about, yeah, and what I've heard some of the dispatchers say was not cooperative,
Mhm.
right? In that
Mhm.
communication and addressing that communication challenge. What does that really mean? Because communication is bidirectional with
Mhm.
the caller and the citizen, and with the person receiving the call there, et cetera. So
Mhm.
usually that's an indication that there might be communication challenges on both sides related to diversity,
Mhm.
language, culture, dialect, um, etc. So when I consider that, I consider it okay. Obviously, with the nature of the calls that come in and who the citizenry are, but also internally in terms of interpersonal relationships. Where I see it the most is is related to a statement that I heard one of the directors, the ECC, the center call center directors indicate
Mm.
a response from a citizen who was frustrated that said, "If I were white, you would have sent the police."
Mm. Mhm. I've heard that before,
Right?
answering 911, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Right.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's a reflection of the complexities around diversity, equity,
Yeah.
and inclusion. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. And it's definitely something that I think when when we talk about, like, our responsibilities for this to be on our forefront of our mind in our centers and things of that nature, situations like that do come across my mind because I think I think if you ask a lot of dispatchers, they're like, well, they can't see us, we can't see them, we don't know who we're talking to. Why does
Mhm,
that matter?
mhm.
And you know, there is a level of we have to be really intentional in order to, move the model forward in order to create these relationships with our callers, because those realities for our callers do exist. They when they say that, they do believe that, even
Yeah,
though they have no idea who they're actually talking to
exactly.
on the other end of the line. We represent an entity, right? Like we represent, common times for me, a police department, and
Yeah.
that is, that individual and that community's perception. So how do we bridge that gap over a phone call
Yeah,
during a
and it's
crisis?
hugely challenging and difficult to do.
Mhm,
Part
mhm,
of I appreciate what you're doing, right? Generally, the public sees calling 911 as this black box. They
mhm,
don't know how it works. They know all they got to do is talk to someone on the phone, and then something happens when public safety services show up.
mhm,
They
mhm,
don't need to, they don't want to know how it really works, what the mechanisms are there, et cetera. I love what
mhm,
you're doing is trying to make that more transparent for people to
mhm,
really understand that there
mhm,
really is a human behind that and the difficulty and challenges with telephone communications,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
So my background is IT and I used to do telephone technical support
mhm,
and I went I went home with successes and failures, frustration. I
mhm,
can't see what your computer is, what's going on with your printer there, et cetera. Let me try to get as much as I can into what how you're telling me so I can visualize that. The
mhm,
nature of the business itself, the work that dispatchers do has communication difficulties embedded, structured into the design of the system itself.
mhm, mhm,
So you add to that the layers of identity and communication language challenges, hugely difficult.
mhm,
So part of that then is, and it's a conversation maybe at the director level, is how do we begin to have conversations about supporting dispatchers in their understanding of cultural communication challenges?
mhm,
Where's the training? Where's the conversation? Where's the simulations? What are some of the indicators of because language itself is so challenging and difficult. So
mhm. I mean, language communicating in our common language, right, is difficult. Like you speak English, I speak English, and we're struggling. Then you add in like folks who English isn't their first language and that's not what they're comfortable communicating in. And then you bring in a translator and it's you, the translator and the caller, and you're just trying to you're trying to communicate over the phone, the old telephone game when you're a kid,
yeah,
and you start here and here and it's like a whole new call. That is kind of the reality what we do as
yeah,
911 dispatchers. We
yeah,
are playing telephone.
yeah,
We're doing our best to meet you in the middle, our callers, and for dispatchers and for the everyday citizen, my sole purpose is to take your call and send it out. Like if there's a call sitting on my board and I can't dispatch it, it bothers me. Like
yeah,
I
yeah,
need it to go. I need it
yeah,
to go as quickly as I can. And
yeah,
I'm sure there are instances, unfortunate instances, where that isn't the reality, but I think the majority of dispatchers will like get a call, put it out. There's no world where I don't want to send your call.
right,
I
exactly.
want
Yeah,
to get you help. I want to, you know, get you the right resources. And for some reason, if police aren't the right resources, I'm going to try to navigate you away from that. But if you still want to talk to an officer, like, yeah, go ahead. Let's talk to
right,
an officer.
right.
Um, but for me, there's never a moment where I'm like just refusing.
Right.
So, but when you're in crisis and you're calling for help and you're being asked questions and you as the caller don't understand why I'm asking those questions, and me as
Yeah.
the call taker, I'm like, why won't you just answer my question? Like, come on, I'm trying to
Yeah.
get you help. And they're like, all I want is help. And
Yeah.
we're battling to try to get the same thing to happen, but it's just so stressful sometimes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. 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 I so at a certain point, you when you kind of see that that is a pattern, that's where my consulting hat. I put my consulting hat on because it's about recurring incidences or experiences, and anything that's a recurring kind of thing then becomes a pattern, and a pattern means that at a certain point we just need to examine it and understand it, pick it apart and understand it to see what the dynamics are and what are the teachable elements behind it. Um, that is on both ends, the citizen and in stress and panicking, and the equipping and the reinforcement of the capabilities of the dispatchers in those kinds of situations. How do we help begin to make that a bit better?
Yeah.
So that's what the consulting dynamic is, and we just go, okay, let's take a look into to see, and that's the part I love because then it leads down to what if we do this?
Mhm.
What if we handled it this way?
Mhm.
Let's have the conversations. Let's see what happens in other situations and nearby regions, jurisdictions, or on other places there, etc. So I'm after data. I'm
Mm.
after data in order to get patterns there, etc., to begin to go, can that be positively influenced? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah.
Let's chase the rabbit hole and see.
And I think when we talk about, diversity and culture shifts, and as a department, one thing that dispatchers have, I think across the board, issues with is retention and recruitment. And when you talk about creating DEI training, putting this on the forefront of the members of our departments, it's, I feel, really establishing a culture shift in our agency rather than just putting folks through like a training to say we did it, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And how can we in emergency services and our agencies ensure that this is kind of starting at our recruitment? Because I think if I believe retention starts at the moment someone applies for a department, for a job. And how do we kind of you put in our recruitment, in our hiring practices, in our promotion practices, that diversity, equity, inclusion is on the forefront of those things.
So all successful organizations, when they identify what their core values are,
Mm.
you can see those core values reflected in almost everything they do,
Mm.
right? So if diversity and inclusion is a core value, then you can see it when you look at it. The lens of that core value goes, your languages. I'm looking for diverse candidates
Mm.
in your advertising.
Mm.
I'm going to those places where the diverse candidates reside.
Mm.
I'm going into their schools and I'm doing job fairs, career fairs where the candidates are that I want to consider engaging. So the core value then affects your mindset, and your mindset then begins to uh, direct your actions
Mm.
because it's a core value. And then it's documented everywhere, it's followed up everywhere. And then here's why that's important, and here's why it's connected. The first bias, how we discovered biases, was in the 60s. You ever hear of the blind orchestra audition
Mm-mm.
test?
Mm-mm.
A white male observed and asked the questions, why are there only white men in the orchestra?
Mm.
And what he did, and this is related to recruitment and hiring and promotion, et cetera, what
Mhm.
he noticed was that when they were having auditions, even though they had women in the auditions, the selections always end up being male. So what he did is he put curtains up so that the people, that the judges couldn't see who was performing.
Mm.
It were called the blind auditions.
Mm.
And what they end up noticing is when they started selecting and hiring people, they go, it's a female, it's a woman. She plays great. They realized that they were being impacted by their blind, their narrowed perspective. That's the unconscious bias. Wasn't the most perfect study. So if you look at it from a PhD perspective, it wasn't controlled and all that, but it proved the point that has been validated ever since then. Hiring, promoting, training is similar dynamic that happens. There's a blind spot that then occurs that requires effort to go, okay, here's what I think I'm seeing in this candidate, in this interview process, in our retention process, etc. Let's get another set of eyes and perspectives. Here's where diversity comes in, based on diversity of thought and diversity of experiences, right? So that you work at it to begin to go, if there's bias in there, how do we identify it and how do we remove it? That's consistent effort over time. So the questions that you ask, the language that's in the interview questions, the setting of the interview questions. And one thing that I've often observed as with new set of eyes there is, subcultures, because family life is so important, and it's important in majority cultures as well, but really, can you think through an 8-hour shift instead of a 12-hour shift? Because it's so disruptive. Because there isn't always the partner dynamic. There's the single dynamic that happens there, etc. And that happens in majority culture families there too. But if diversity is a core value, then one of the ways it would be reflected is when they're hired, to your point, retention, how do we keep that person by making work better? And maybe thinking through, there's a blinder we have in just the fact that we do these long shifts. And then if there's overtime, right?
And there is overtime. when there's overtime.
when there's overtime. I'm trying to be nice, right? Right? And that's a turnoff. That's a burnout. That's a I can't do it. And so I step back and go, it's obvious from an outsider perspective that maybe that structured model doesn't align with your diversity and inclusion core value. And that's why I say blinders. Right? That's an example of that says, why can't that change? And now you start getting a little bit into the equity dynamic, because you go, whoa, people don't like change. Institutions don't like change.
Yeah, dispatchers anti-change. We don't. If we can avoid changing, we will matrix that thing. We don't need
exactly. Exactly. Right? So you go, okay. And then that's why it goes that's why the dynamics repeat. Because if you don't do change, you're locked into the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and over, but expecting different results.
What we always come across, or better yet, I deal with helping folks get into this line of work, right? And one of the things that I tell people is like, look, the reality is you need to adapt to this job. This job is not going to adapt to you.
That's an ugly reality, but it's true.
Ugly reality. It's so true. I actually had someone leave a YouTube comment asking, they said, hey, like I have a child who's autistic. Will this impact me getting the job? And the answer is like, no. So you simply having a child who's autistic is not going to impact you getting the job. But when she unpacked it a little more, she was like, I'm concerned about like being available for appointments, being able to go, drop of the hat, go do this. And my response to her was like, you got to really look at your support system. And if you are unable to get off work, if you do get stuck on shift, if do you have someone to help you pick up those gaps? Because the reality is, and this is for, my coworkers who have children, who have, families at home that require them to be there. this is a reality that people do deal with and make work because of the type of work that we do.
Yeah.
But to your point is, do we have to do it this way? Is it done this way because it's just been done this way? Or is there a world where we can make it look a little different? I don't know. I haven't delved into that yet, but it's true. Like we get so tunnel vision, we get so, well, it's been done this way. You know, I learned to dispatch uphill barefoot in snow. So you should learn to dispatch uphill, like that exists. And, you know,
Exactly.
I try to
Exactly.
dispatch learning less, doing
Exactly.
less trauma. So,
Exactly.
but
Exactly.
there are people who feel that it happened to me this way, it should happen to you this way, and
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be like that. So
Exactly.
I think you
Exactly.
made a great point there.
Exactly. Because they're polar opposites of your core values, if that's the
Mhm,
case. Because if
mhm,
what that means is not so much putting everything into this box and making sure everyone fits into that box, but it's
mhm,
also, well, can we round out the corners? Can we expand the box? Can we look at things differently and do things differently? That's the part where you go, okay, there are many different needs out there. How do we expand to address and meet those needs? Right.
mhm,
So to your point, that's why the industry is challenged with kind of being immature and new to the whole diversity mindset perspective,
yeah,
because
mhm,
you have to get to the point. I love the way you just did. You start have to asking the what if questions.
mhm,
Why is it that way? What if we
mhm,
did it differently?
mhm,
They're threatening, but they are the pointed questions that need to be asked.
mhm, mhm. And I think we need to be okay with having the conversation. Like having the conversation doesn't mean the change is happening tomorrow. And we all know it'll take 20 years for a change to happen
Right,
in the
exactly.
dispatch center. So just
Right.
having the conversation doesn't mean the change is going to happen. So dispatchers are listening, like, I just shut up. They're listening to you. They're making us talk about stuff. We do need to talk about stuff because I think everyone who works in a first responder realm has been impacted in some way, shape, or form by the way we do things.
Yeah,
And it doesn't mean that it's right, wrong, or different. It just means it impacts us. And
exactly.
how can we improve our situations? We do have a retention problem. We do have a staffing problem. So not unpacking and looking at the way we do things is comedy because we obviously have a problem. So we
Yeah,
should be examining the way we're bringing
exactly.
people in.
You have to understand why you're having this problem.
Mhm,
And if we
mhm,
understand why,
mhm,
which is, yeah, different layers of why, but why,
mhm,
and then it'll open up the understanding that goes, oh, these are the possibilities for how we can begin to address those
mhm,
contributing factors, those root cause dynamics, et cetera. But to your point, the conversations help deepen your understanding of the problem,
mhm,
right?
mhm, mhm.
So I love the conversations because at that point is where you go, haven't thought about it that way. Oh,
Yeah.
love it. Love it. Diversity of thought. Hadn't seen that. Oh,
I mean, just in our 30-minute conversation, you started talking about 12-hour shift work, and I'm like, well, we've always had shift work at 12 hours. What are you talking about? And I mean, it's true. Like, I
yeah.
mean, I enjoy shift work because I have no children. It's just me and my fiance, and we come and go as we please. But for
Uh-huh.
people who have
Uh-huh.
families, who have different,
Uh-huh.
household situations, it is a
Uh-huh.
struggle,
Uh-huh.
and so it isn't something that would ever come to my forefront of thought, but I know it's in those folks who are reaching out to me, asking questions, and it's out there. And so, is there a world where we can make us a little more accessible to folks who have families, and that's a concern for them? So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's
And I love that because that leads to the creative problem solving, the beauty of work, and then you get some change dynamics, and after a while, people settle down and accept it, et cetera. But it opens up a whole new world of possibilities. But more importantly, it begins to have the possibility of fixing the turnover, the
yeah,
retention, the staffing issues, et cetera.
mm,
Because you've broken out of we've always done it this way mindset.
yeah. So you, we talked about it in the front at the intro. Is you're a graduate student, a sociology student, and you kind of filled me in a little bit on a study you're proposing. Hasn't gotten approved yet, but you're cooking with it. It's a great topic of discussion, and it's something that I think even if we're not, if you don't realize it yet, you're gonna realize it after listening to this question because it's something we deal with every single day as 911 dispatchers, call takers, and it's when you're dealing with callers or calls that are reporting party is describing the person as suspicious or using similar language that is very broad and that the caller believes what they mean by suspicious. Hopefully if you're a dispatcher listening and someone says that, you're not just taking it at face value and you're making them tell you actually what they're doing that is suspicious. But that's kind of what your study is trying to focus on, right? Can you
That
tell
is
us a little
correct.
bit
Yeah,
about
yeah.
that?
So, yeah, right. So, from a sociology perspective, there's a theoretical framework that's called symbolic interactionism. When people meet together, who they are as individuals and how they see themselves and how they see each other gets communicated with some of the language and the words that they use that carry meaning that translates into the stereotypes that we have, the biases that we have, etc. We are walking signboards of meaning. We've learned that growing up, our signs and symbols and how we communicate, etc. So what you are what dispatchers are engaged in is a caller's perspective of some part of society they have seen, they have it interpreted this way, and they have interpreted the person in that scene in this particular way. And they're trying to communicate that interpretation in their words to you so that you can intervene. That is loaded.
Mhm. So true.
Loaded.
Ah.
And it's all about ambiguity and interpretation, judgment of people, individuals in different settings. They bring into that dynamic set of meaning. So in sociology, what we've experienced and what's a pattern called living while black,
Mm.
right? Where a caller goes, someone's in the park and he isn't supposed to be having a grill there because there's no built-in grills. Calling dispatcher, calling police to get that intervened, right?
Mhm.
Why does that citizen believe that that situation doesn't fit
Mm.
their paradigm?
Mhm.
Sociologists try to get into understanding there is meaning being communicated there. How do we respond to that when we
Mm.
look at it from the dispatcher perspective? Because it's so subjective, it's so ambiguous.
Mhm. It really is, yeah.
Yeah.
It really
So,
Man, I know dispatchers listening are like, "Ah, ambiguous, that's probably the best word."
right, right, right. So the premise of my study is dispatchers sit in the social and society's catbird seat.
Mm.
And the catbird seat is the advantageous position where you see everything going on in that community with the citizens.
Mm.
And it's a perspective that has social value about what the citizens are experiencing, what their living situations are, what their issues are, what their communication dynamics is. And so I am proposing the reason it's a value of someone institution like Eastern Michigan University is I want to get this catbird seat perspective from the dispatcher's perspective.
Mm.
With something as challenging and difficult as suspicious, to get a gauge for what's going outside in the community, what's going on in the community.
Mm.
That's a it's a gold mine of diversity, equity, and inclusion information.
Mhm.
It's a gold mine.
Mhm. It always drives me crazy when I say things like this, but it hasn't been done before. It's just like I barely see studies on 911, dispatchers and what we've experienced, and that's the problem, right? That's
Right.
why our fight for first responder status is still ongoing. Is because no one's looked at the realities of what we're dealing with and what we have to overcome at work every day. So when you're coming out here and putting a lens on this specific issue that is grand for so many reasons, and highlighting dispatchers, it's phenomenal because we need more research about these realities.
So these are the kinds of conversations Ryan, Jim, and I have at 911 Training Institute. Jay, the team that goes, okay, we've got all kinds of skills, perspectives there, etc. I happen to be the analytical one that goes, where's the data? That's key to my consulting. And I go, has anyone ever looked at it from this perspective? So that's kind of how we differentiate ourselves as an organization, as a company. 911 Training Institute is focusing on what's the dispatcher's perspective.
Mhm.
There's a lot of work because people connect dispatching with policing. There's a ton of work in policing,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I'm at this point. If I can get this first one done,
Mhm.
and it opens the door for others there, et cetera. And inside the academic institution, there's slow work beginning to come alongside that says, yeah, we need to get more insight into the dispatcher space there as well, to do more studies.
Mhm.
So that's slowly beginning to formulate a bit. But yeah, and so I appreciate your comment there because we've recognized that for a while, and Jim's been too busy. So that's my point of contact for the organization.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think that the lens you're specifically looking at, how we're being impacted is really needed because I think things come in waves, right? And there's a big push um, that's happened with like mental health, self
Hmm.
care,
Hmm.
um, how the trauma dispatchers are hearing affects them comparatively to an officer, a firefighter going out and putting like physical eyes, sight, hands on the situation compared to what the dispatcher is hearing. There's been a big wave and push in regards to acknowledging that we should not be sweeping things under the rug. We should be taking care of ourselves so we can take care of each other and so on and so forth. Um, and now with this push in law enforcement, this acknowledgement that we have some work to do coming, we're now starting to look at the lens of how those socioeconomic things impact how we're handling these calls,
Exactly.
the language that's being used, our own personal bias, because we all have it. We just have to be intentional with going, no, no, no. And so I'm really excited about that coming to the forefront. And I
Yeah,
think
and Ashley, here's where I love the word possibilities because I
mm,
like to think out of the box.
mhm,
But here's where it also connects with is community outreach.
mm, mhm,
Because the negative outcomes that happen in our social relationships
mm,
upset and disrupt the relationship between citizens in the community and policing and dispatching itself,
mhm.
which makes that whole circle of interactions even more challenging and difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
Understanding that, then we'll have literally practical applications from looking at the possibility for enhancing community outreach, community relations,
Mhm,
because those outcomes, people have legitimate fears, legitimate hesitancies. If
mhm,
you're a community, ethnic community impacted by those negative outcomes, you're not inclined to be cooperative, to
mm,
be engaged, and to maintain fear and disrespect for the whole public safety enterprise,
Yeah, those are.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at this holistically, you go, there's some insights that can be applied not just to upfront and interfacing with the call, the citizens and the cause, but back in with community outreach and relationship building.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. 1,000%. And I think one thing that is a struggle maybe for us, we're working with, like, we know these folks, right? Like they're our officers. They're, you know, they're great. And it's like, well, our everyone's reality is valid. So if our callers, have this perception of police in general, it's not a like my officer thing or a my dispatcher thing. It's a general thing.
It's
They have had an experience. They have had a reality um, that has made this a valid thing for them. And the one thing that we say often in dispatch is like, hopefully you're not calling 911 every day. There are certain people who unfortunately have to call 911 often because of life situations and circumstances, but hopefully during this one time that you have to call 911 in your life, it's a good experience.
yeah,
And it's a good experience in a terrible moment.
yeah,
And we want that to be your memory of
yeah,
your interaction with
yeah,
a police department. Like that's our job, I think, as dispatchers when we talk about our initial impact on the community is I could give you a really bad experience
yeah.
on 911 and you're like, that department sucks. I called them and this is my experience. And that's what you're going to tell all your friends, which
Exactly,
valid. If
exactly.
you had a bad experience, it's now the department that's going to catch the plaque, not me,
Yeah,
not me personally, but our department. So we are a step in healing community relationships one call at a time, because
yeah.
hopefully you're not calling every week, but
Right, right, right.
but it goes a long way because that person's gonna say I had a good experience, and
And
that's
and it's so easy how all those good experiences can get blown up just one big
Mhm.
publicized bad experience, right?
Exactly.
One
Mhm.
outcome, just gotta rebuild that relationship, trust, that
Mhm.
positive perspective all over again. Based on
Exactly.
that, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
Because when when normal citizens think about it, right? They go, "Yep, they rock." I
Mhm.
call them, they come through, and 99 times out of 100, they're heroes. They do their job very, very well. All it takes
Mhm.
is one,
Exactly.
right?
Mhm.
And you know the way the media works, that one gets it
Mhm.
blows up,
Yes. It
right?
does. Yeah. 100%. In multiple different formats.
Exactly.
Reels, YouTube, long form media, just
Yeah.
yeah.
Right, and
Viral.
it sticks with you. It's lasting because
Mhm.
it starts getting into our spaces that I teach about, right? The stereotypes, the prejudices, the biases, that
Mhm.
social. That's why the social dynamic of 911s as being the front end to that public safety interface there, that catbird seat perspective. It
Mhm.
is so fascinating.
Ugh, so good. So good. So many great things, so much great information. I'm so excited for all the stuff that's going to come from what you're working on. And I appreciate you coming onto the show and just sharing a small snippet of conversations we should be having daily in our centers across the industry, across our platforms. It's been really eye-opening and insightful. One of
Ashley, I really am glad that I'm able to be here and share this moment with you and this information. I hope I get to come back at some future date and
oh
time
my gosh,
with
wow.
some more information about the study and some help I'm going to need from you and your colleagues. But this has been very stimulating for me, very informative as well. So thank you for having me.
Oh, heck yeah. Don't tease me with a good time. You better come back. Well, Tyrone, what I ask everybody before I close up the show is what advice would you give someone who's considering a career, and for you specifically, just in public service in general?
I'm a bit old school. And public service for me was like one of those highest privileged occupations.
Mm,
Like you get to do well for the public. It's this elevated concept of being able to make sure society and public service and public safety, ma- you don't have to worry about it because the people that are involved got your back,
mm,
right?
mm,
So the advice I would give, considering public service, public safety, is keep sight of your why.
mm,
Why helps drive motivation, inspiration, excellence, and self care.
mm,
Why helps you stay connected to, even when there's speed bumps, even when there's quicksand pits, getting out, brushing yourself off, and getting back into it. Because that's what you're experiencing, the reward, you're experiencing the high, the fit with your mindset, your skills, your capabilities is all bundled into why. Why
mm.
are you doing it in the first place? And this is exactly what you've been experiencing, so that a year from now, 5 years from now, however further along in your career you are, that why is still burning in your heart, still
Mm.
burning in your head.
Mhm.
I advise people, keep hold of your why.
Amazing advice. Tyrone, thank you so much for joining me. Truly, I'm going to have an amazing time pulling out all the gems in this episode. So, again, thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Ashley. Take care. You have a good one.
All right, I'll be right back with you.
Okay.
All right, everybody. That was another amazing episode here at Let's Talk Dispatch. These are conversations we need to be having in our centers, with our people, with our leadership, with our communities. So I think Tyrone's advice in the end was perfect for anything that you do in your life, in your career. Find your why. Find your why, hold on to it, and make sure in every decision, every avenue that you take, you're always finding that why again to make sure you are heading in the right direction. Until next time, everybody, stay raspy. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Dispatch podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the show, or maybe even submitting your own story, you can do all that and more at theraspydispatcher.com. Until next time, stay raspy.